I spent 30 hours testing the experimental Manor Lords patch. In this video, we'll go over all the big changes so you can decide if it's worth updating or not. Timestamps are in the description, and let's get to it. Another thing that was changed was how crop rotation works. I believe they adjusted the way the AI handles their tasks. So they will sometimes gather fields and then bring stuff back once they're done picking. What would end up happening is once one field was done, people would swarm from all over the region to go take crops back from that field back to their farmhouse and then go back out and try and harvest. The problem is if you've got a bunch of small fields, they'll leave halfway through a harvest and then run to some corner of the map to pick up one piece of, whatever is on the floor and then take it back. They wouldn't ever make it back to the region to continue harvesting, basically. It's a little better, but they still do it, unfortunately. So these guys are still going, but you see these guys just left. So this guy was right here. He was supposed to be harvesting this. He stopped, so you can come here and pick up these things. It does help having the oxen a little bit because they will carry a lot more items, but it's still, you can't get to all the fields that you have. You have to still make it smaller than what you would normally do. So this whole area, I was doing manual farming and I still had leftover time. I was able to do every single field here in a single year if I did manual farming. So I switched it over. I did smaller fields. I did crop rotation, and I wanted to see if I could get everything done in September. It's not possible because, like I said, you'll notice they come over here, they start harvesting. In all my testing, there he goes. This guy's taking off. He wants to go grab one of these, some of the flax. Somebody's going to grab some of this flax, and they're just going to completely leave all this alone. And you'll notice I've got a farmhouse right here. This is literally right in front of them, and they ignore it. These fields, they don't do it. Now, you could try limited work area. Again, you're going to have the issue where they will start to harvest here, but then as soon as they see something on the other end of the map, they see this barley. They got the flax already. There's nothing here. We got wheat and barley on the floor. They're just going to drop everything they're doing. Come from across the map. You can see them streaming in right here. So farming, I would say, is not fixed. It's better than it was before, for sure, because I remember before they would path almost instantaneously. They would drop what they're doing to go take stuff off of a field that was recently done. Now they will sort of harvest a little bit, and then they will stop and go. You can see they did it again. So now they're coming all the way back here. If they just stayed here and harvested here, and then when everything was harvested, they would come out and do it, that's a totally different story. They would probably get everything done, and then they would have to spend maybe part of October to go pick stuff up off the ground. Again, not nearly as efficient as if you did it manual farming. So in order to make a farm like this work, I would probably have to build maybe 3 or 4 farmhouses, spread them out, and have them less workers in each. Potentially that would work. But again, you're going to get a massive drop in efficiency if you're automating it through crop rotation, as opposed to just doing it, turn crop rotation off, and manually switch stuff, and then force harvest, just like I did in my guide. That is still the best way to do it. Now I'm going to talk about 2 other points together, and I feel like they're somewhat related. If you look at the trade post, I have a lot of different trades going right now. So I've got tools, shoes, and ale, gambeson mail, sidearm, small shields, and helmets. And then I also have bread and vegetables. I've got trade routes for each of those. And this trade post is mostly able to handle it. Sometimes they still have an issue when you have too many trade routes in one trading post. And again, building an extra trade post doesn't help you because the traders will go to a trade post and then ignore all the other ones. So having multiples doesn't really help you. But in this case, you could see we have shoes, charcoal, small shield, sidearm, bread, and tools. But a lot of those other ones are not getting in here. So like the helmets, the mail armor aren't getting in there. And that's because what ends up happening is there's an order of operations that they want to grab items from. And so they will go top down. They'll basically start at the left. They'll grab everything from here top down, and then they'll go to the next list and the next list. So they'll grab the bread first. Then they'll check over here for charcoal. They'll make sure charcoal's stocked. Then they'll look for tools. Now, if the bread gets taken before they get to the shoes, they will stop and they will not get shoes. They will go back to the bread, make sure this is topped up, and then they'll go back down the list. Okay, so is everything topped up? The charcoal, that's topped up. The tools, the shoes, the ale, all this stuff's topped up. Now, this was the exact same order of operations that they had in the previous patch. But the difference here is it takes a really long time for the traders to get all the way from the edge of the map to your actual trading post. So your traders have a lot more time to stock goods before they get taken by traders. So that means you can actually have an efficient trade route because there's a delay when the trader actually comes. So it does nerf you down quite a bit. You can't sell the same volume that you used to be able to. However, I haven't really seen this global market supply flip. I saw it flip once, and I think it was with tools. It only happened once, and it went down like a single gold. It went from 6 to 5, and then the next month it went back up. I feel like you can't generally flip this with one town, but let's say if I had 4 towns selling tools, that's when that's going to come into effect now. So any single, if you're mostly used to running a single town, I feel like this trade fix is probably a little bit better now because you can basically set up your trade routes and they will function the way that you expect them to function, just on a slower scale. Now, you can still make a ton of money. I've got this on the hardest difficulty setting, so I've got all the annual taxes doubled. And that leads me into my next point, which is this new thing called the annual royal tax. This starts right around year number 2, and it basically is a tax for how many people, every family that you have to pay a certain amount of gold. And I believe it also has to do with the level of your town. I haven't quite calculated all of the what makes it go up, but it seems like it's primarily tied to how many people you have. So the more people you add, the more tax you're going to pay. So this is 2,400 gold every single year. So you just need to, the way you deal with this is you have to very early on establish some kind of trade route no matter what region you're in. So in this case, this region has very good soil and it has infinite supply of iron. So I tried to build most of my trade around that. If you look at the trade items, most of these, like the farm gambeson, are basically from the farms. Mail and sidearm, that's from the iron. The shields, that you can do anywhere because you have infinite supply of trees if you set that up properly. The helmet, same thing, that's the iron. And then tools is iron. Shoes, shoes is great in the early game because if you have a lot of leather that you have nothing to do with, you could sell it. And then if you want to continue that, you would just make a bunch of goat sheds so that you can generate enough hides to turn into leather, and then shoes, and then you can generate. So some of these trade routes you can do pretty much anywhere, and some of them you're going to be region locked. So I would say for sure anything that has metal, or obviously the clay tiles, those are going to be locked behind infinite clay source and infinite iron. But a lot of these other ones, and then also like the gambeson, you're not going to have a whole lot of luck doing that. But let's say you can import some sheep and do yarn and dyes. Every region has berries, and you can get sheep anywhere. So you could basically set up whatever trade route you want. So any of the items that are basically just plank or wood related, you can sell anywhere. The cloaks you can sell anywhere. Shoes, same thing. So you can still make any region profitable, and you just need to make sure that regional wealth stays high enough so that your small tax payment is enough to cover basically what this is. So the easiest way to do this is what your annual tax is divided by 12. That's what you need to make sure you're making each month, and then add a little bit more. So if we have a regional tax of 2,400, you would divide that by 12. That means I need to make sure at least 200 gold per month is coming into the personal treasury. So if we go here to the land tax, we're making 5% off of 7,200. So 7,200, 1% would be 72. Multiply that by 5, was that 3,500? Or sorry, 350. So we make 350, 200 of it goes directly to the annual royal tax. And this is actually collected once per year. So it's not that it comes out every month, but you want to make sure that your accrual rate is higher than that so that you don't go negative. If you go negative right now, it's not a big deal. It basically just keeps you from being able to expand to different regions. So like you need money to start new towns, and then you also need money to hire more retinue. So if you're negative, you're basically stuck to the region you're in and you cannot hire retinue. But outside of that, there's no downside. If you just go negative, just let it go negative. It's not the end of the world. If you want to stay afloat, keep your town small so that you don't accrue a massive annual royal tax. You can see here, we don't even have 250 people here, and they still want 2.4K per year, which is a lot. So we could probably grow this town to maybe 350 to 400 and still be roughly break even. We have a few more trade routes that we could start here, but you'll notice even with the perk, so they did change. That's another thing, is the perks got changed. So this trade logistics used to make every trade route cost 25 gold to open. Now it's 50% less. And they also made the trade route scale pretty harsh. So you can see here, even at the highest trade route, the plate armor is going to cost us 14,640. That's a pretty hefty one. Or let's say if I wanted to open up another trade route for spears and pole arms, that's going to cost 4,270 and 4,800. So you can see these are massive, massive investments. And then if you're only making 7 each trade, 4,270 by 7, and that'll tell you what your break-even point is. So I got 610. The traders buy in groups of 50. So if I need to sell 600 of these things to break even, that means this guy needs to make 12 trips before I break even on that trade. So there comes a point where opening your trade route is going to be cost prohibitive. And so what I've noticed, and it feels like what he's trying to do with this patch, what the dev is trying to do with this patch, is to avoid people from having gigantic towns and having everything all in one town, and rather spread it out and have multiple smaller towns that are self-sufficient or somewhat reliant, but not completely, you know. Let's say, for example, if I had this town half the size, I could probably still maintain the profitability pretty close to where it is right now. And then my cost would be half. And then I could do another town over here and do the same thing. It's much easier to keep a smaller town profitable than it is a bigger town, because it's really difficult to track what everybody's doing, making sure they're contributing something that's actually going to go to your bottom line. Again, the royal tax, I've been able to deal with it fairly easily, but that's because I've got a ton of hours in this thing. And it did take me a playthrough or two before I actually got used to it. So my guess is if you're brand new to the game and you're having to deal with this, my personal opinion, I always just turn it off. I would not play with it on. But if you do turn it on and you want to play with it on, you have to establish a trading route very quickly, get your manor house up so you can start taxing your people, and make sure that you keep pace with whatever your annual tax is at the very minimum. And then obviously have a little bit more on top of that so you can hire retinue and expand to different regions. Now, the best way you can gain early regional wealth is to fight bandits. I turned bandits off on this one because I wanted to have a little bit more of a challenge. And it's tough. I went negative for the first, I don't know, 2 years, 3 years. I think I didn't have a profit until 3 years in, when I started to turn all of my trading systems on. But again, I think if I had to go back and redo it again, I would probably expand to multiple towns early on and do it that way instead. So yeah, that's kind of a rundown of the trade and how that's changed. And then that also, in my opinion, is tied to how the annual royal tax works. Interesting change. Now, one more thing I want to talk about, and this was added recently, where you can allow or disallow foreign trade. Let's say, for example, in this region, they have infinite iron, and let's say we wanted to bring iron back to the mainland, even though just assume we don't have this. You could technically trade it between your regions, and all you have to do is you go to your trade route, and on this one, let's say we want to trade iron slabs. So we would import at the place we want to import it. Make sure that your import number is higher than what your current stock is. So if we have 490 and we want to import still, we have to make sure that number's higher. So if we put it to 500, that means we'll import 10. And then what I would need to do is I would need to go to my other town, and then you do export here. And then again, you need to make sure your number is lower than what the other one is. So if we have 490 and we want to export, we need to make sure we export down to a smaller number than what this one is. So this will allow us to export 90 of these things. And you also have to make sure you uncheck allow foreign trade. And that means essentially, if you notice right here, if we have our import price at 14, but then we uncheck allow foreign trade, it basically drops the price to whatever your regular export price is. So if my export price is 4, that means these towns will trade between each other without any kind of export tariff. I guess they call it like a tariff. So there's no tariff. So this town would send 10 iron slabs down here, and this town would pay 4 gold each, so 40 regional wealth would go back to this town. Now, it works okay, but the problem is when you do it like this, you're going to get one person traveling by hand, and they're going to grab 1 iron slab at a time and then go walk it to this trade route, whatever your trade post is here, and then bring back the regional wealth. Obviously, trading one at a time is extremely slow. So the only way you can go around that is to hire or to order a new horse. And the problem with the horses is they're still broken from the previous patch. So they were broken in the last patch. They're still broken in this patch. So when somebody grabs the horse, you can see it says mounting the horse. They will go grab it. Their horse will have a cart behind it. They'll pull 50 items from wherever they're trying to export from. So let's say if we were exporting coal from here, the horse and cart would grab 50, and then he would travel all the way up here, go to the trade post, do absolutely nothing, and then turn right back around and then just do that loop on and on and on. So no actual goods are traded. So that's a problem, because that means you have to rely on doing it by hand right now, which means you're going to be moving one at a time each month. If it takes them a month to get there and back, you're literally selling 1 item per month to your new region. So that's not really the ideal situation. So really cool idea, not implemented properly yet. So if you're looking to do this on this patch, I would probably hold. I would not download the new patch yet, but this is something that I imagine if he gets it working properly, I think it's a really cool idea. And then on a similar vein, let's talk about the packing station. So you can build a packing station. You've got to build it at both regions for that to work. And it can technically work, but it is still bugged right now. So the way the packing station works is you need to build it. And once it's up, you need to determine who you're going to barter with. So in this case, we're going to go to Valdebrand. We need to figure out what we're going to send. In this case, we're again going to send the iron slabs. And then we're going to get back, I don't know, whatever they're going to send us, right? Let's just say we get back planks. Once you order mules and you assign a family here, they will grab the mules and grab, I believe it's 20 items each. Which means, so you have 3 family members. If you have 3 mules, they will grab 60 total and then travel up here. And then they will drop the iron slabs off, grab the planks, and then come back. The problem is it doesn't work right now like that anyways. If this region doesn't have any regional wealth, then the mules get stuck and you're basically screwed. You can delete the building and your people are still stuck there. They're just constantly forever unpacking their mule. So that's one of the big bugs that I ran into with the packing station. Make sure before you set that up, make sure both regions have regional wealth before you send people off. Now you can do it without the mule. And again, they're going to carry a very small amount. I think it's 5. I think they carry 5 in hand. And then they will slowly restock a town. So you could do it that way. It's very inefficient though, in my opinion. I don't think it's really worth it. I would say if you're looking to interconnect a ton of regions together, you could still do it. It's just not properly implemented yet. So again, I would probably hold off on that. If you can make several regions that are completely independent and then maybe once in a while send a shipment, something like that would be okay. I would say one of the big things, if you want to have soldiers in a region that doesn't have infinite iron, that would be a good time to send maybe weapons and stuff because you only need that maybe once every year, once every 2 years. And you only need to replenish those weapons when people die, right? If you're not going to be selling them there, you just need to send it once. So it's not that big of a deal. So I would probably go the packing station route and just get those weapons over there and get back whatever you can. But if you're looking to, let's say you want to have your big town as the trading hub and you don't have, let's say you want to import beer and then this region has fertile soil and you want to send the beer back every single month and you need to send a big volume, this is not the patch to do it, I don't think. At least I have not found out a way to do it. If it is possible, it's difficult. And I've got, I don't know, 320 hours into the game. So I feel pretty comfortable with most of the mechanics and I was not able to figure out. Doesn't mean it's not possible. I'm just saying it's probably not as obvious how to get it to work, if it is even possible. So that is the packing station, the trading, and the annual royal tax. And I know I touched on this a little bit before, but these 2 trade perks were nerfed. The trade logistics, instead of going 25 gold per route, it's now 50% less. And as we saw in the other one, you can get trade routes that are still, even with this perk, are still going to cost you 4,000 for a small item and 12 to 13,000 for a big item if you have a lot of trade routes open. If you don't have this perk, obviously it'd be double what that is. And then the other one is the better deals. This reduces the tariff. Instead of 10, it's 5. So basically, you can still import stuff somewhat cheaply here, but it's still going to be much more expensive than what your import price is, which makes sense. So if you would normally sell something for 4, you're going to buy it for 9. If you sell it for 1, you're going to buy it for 6. So there are still some items where there's enough spread where you can import it, turn it into something else, and then sell it. Like, for example, clay. So if you look at clay, you can purchase clay for 6. We can turn it into a tile and sell it for 8. So you can still make money with certain items, but it's much harder to do now. They also changed archer damage from 4 to 12. They should be doing a little bit of damage. It's still not very much, though, at max distance. Most of your damage is going to be done from very close range. You can see here is about 6, 7, 8 volleys, 9, still nothing. But if we move close and we turn on shoot at will, we'll see a pretty big difference. Except when they charge. So typically what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to have them engage with somebody else, and then you're going to shoot them almost point blank. And they do pretty significant amount of damage. Not so much morale damage, but they do cause the surrounded effect when you're close enough to them, so their effectiveness goes down and they basically don't do any damage. I wouldn't say they're completely fixed, but they're much more useful than they were before. Yeah, so if you can get yourself into a nice flanking position, you can do quite a bit of damage to the enemy. See from a close range, that guy's dead. A couple guys back there. And this is with shoot at will on. I don't know that I want to say they're fixed, but I would say they're much better than they were before. They're actually doing some kind of damage. But to be honest, I would probably, unless you're going to have 3 or 4 of these things, I feel like it's either make a bunch of them and target 1 unit to get them out quickly, or have none. I don't think having 1 or 2 archers makes a whole lot of sense. I think you're better off swapping this guy for another melee unit. Now, another change they added, anytime somebody dies, the family or the household that they're part of goes into a state of mourning. And it basically means that you don't get to recover that person for at least 30 days. As soon as they die, the countdown starts. And that means that person, the wife can't get married and they won't have another son to replace. So there's 2 males and 1 female per family. So as soon as somebody dies, you need 30 days before you'll get another person back. And that basically keeps it so that if you have a big battle, there's actually some risk to losing people. Before, they would pretty much pop back. Even if you lost 100 people, you'd be back to full capacity in like a month or 2. In this case, it's going to delay it another month. So that's kind of an interesting change. And again, you can see if you hold tab, you'll see the crying eye symbol across all the houses where somebody was dead. So not only is that going to slow down your economy because you don't have people to fulfill the jobs that they were doing, but it also means you can't recruit those people back to fight for you. There's a couple other smaller things that I want to go over as well. So the overly high ale consumption was fixed. You used to be able to have to just completely spam barley every field that you can just to be able to supply a small town without having people get pissed off. Now, right now, I was able to stock up on barley. I think I did a mass amount of farming and then I had it probably lasted 2 or 3 years before I had to do it again. So this, whatever barley you can collect from this field was enough to feed 250 people for a couple years. It's significantly less, the consumption rate. So much easier to keep your people happy with ale. You don't need as much barley. If I remember correctly, he said he cut it by 1/3. So they used to want 1 per month. My estimates is they would use between 0.6 and 0.7 per month. That's because I guess they get busy and they don't get to the ale house to drink it on time. And so it would actually, instead of 1 per month, they actually ended up using about 0.65 per month. Now, if they want 1 per month, and now they only want 1/3 per month, my guess is it's probably less than 1/3 even. So they probably only use like 0.15 or 0.2 ale per family per month now, assuming that the same logic applies. I haven't tested exactly how much it is because it's been so low that it's not even worth testing, in my opinion. You're going to have an excess of ale if you have any kind of decent farmland there. That's been mostly fixed, in my opinion. Very, very good fix also. This is the first game I've ever been able to export ale, and I made a lot of money on it. I don't have it right now because, like I said, I stopped farming barley because I was doing some testing here, but overall, very good change there. Another thing, if you had small stables and let's say you moved it around, let's say I moved this over here, you would always get the pop-up saying that there's no living space for the animal and they would run off. Even if, so they built it right away, the animal would still run off. That's been pretty much fixed. And then also homelessness. If I were to delete this building, or in my case, I got raided earlier in this campaign and I had people that didn't have a place to live. As soon as we fixed the rubble, they moved right back in. So that one's fixed. I know that was making a lot of people upset, but that one's pretty much done. And then the saw pits. 2 things here. So the little pop-up saying insufficient resources, that pop-up is pretty much gone at this point, for this building anyways. And then your log storage was increased from 1 to 5. So a word of caution here. These saw pits will chew through your entire logging camp worth of wood in like a month or less. So they can go through this whole log storage extremely quickly. So what I recommend doing is setting a pretty high reserve so that they don't chew through all your logging camp, assuming that you need logs to do stuff. If you just need to spam saw pit, whatever, let them go to 0. But yeah, that's definitely something to keep an eye out for. I found myself, see right here, 400 planks. At one point I had over 1,000 and I didn't even realize it because I've got several logging camps and he chewed through every single, just this one logging camp with a single family, chewed through 3 logging camps worth of supply plus whatever was on the ground. So as long as you have a lot of oxen to supply the logging camp or the saw pit, he will just burn through all of it and then convert it to planks very quickly. So that's a good change. Oh, and then one last thing. If you set a construction reserve and then you exit the game and then reload it later, this construction reserve goes away. So just be aware you have to reset it every single time when you reload the game. That caught me off guard a couple times too. If you've got like 5 towns, you have to go through each town to do it. So just be aware of that. The game being stuck at the summary screen after a victory and game over. So that only happened for me when you try to get to the large town. And you can see in this one, we reached the large town and we're still playing. So it is definitely fixed. That was appreciated because I remember trying to do a test and I got stuck there. It took me several hours to get to that point. And then I planned on doing experiments and then I just got stuck in the loop. So that one 100% is gone. Another thing that was supposedly fixed was the market inefficiency. I would say I didn't really notice much of a difference, to be honest. I still noticed sometimes the market would have holes where they should be getting supply, but they were not. And that mostly has to do with if you have a market stall, if you have a bunch of market stalls down and you don't have a lot of population yet, and then eventually you add that population in, there's something bugged where these stalls don't recognize the houses and they don't send their goods to them. So you could have a ton of stalls, a ton of workers, a ton of supplies, and if you do the math, they should be getting supply, but they don't. So what you end up having to do is deleting your marketplace. Just delete the whole thing and then redo it. And then you'll see immediately afterwards, as soon as they're stocked, those houses will get supply again. That has not been fixed. So I don't know what the line about inefficient market supply is. My markets are usually pretty efficient anyways without the fix, but I've noticed the issue that I do have was not fixed. So again, I don't know specifically what they're talking about, but if you do have a market issue where you have enough stalls, you have enough people, you have enough supplies, and it's still not getting supply out there, it means you need to delete your market and restart it. And then another point, the rate of Hildebolt's claims. You'll notice in this one, I was able to back him into the corner. I've noticed depending on the difficulty you're on, it's much more accurate to what the description says. Before, it didn't really matter what difficulty you're on. This dude would just claim everything in a very rapid succession. Now, if you're on aggressive AI settings, he's still going to claim everything extremely quickly. If he's on default or passive, it's way slower. So they didn't change anything, I would say, on the aggressive setting, or if they did, it's very minimal and I couldn't really tell the difference. But on the default setting or the passive setting, it's a massive difference. So it should be much easier to actually survive when you're playing with Hildebolt on the map. They also added some new armors for the upgraded Retinue. If you look right here, this is a new helmet and a new chest piece. This is also a new helmet. It still needs a little bit of work. It's clipping a little bit on some places, but overall, I think they look pretty decent. While some of these changes are still clearly not working properly, my overall impression of the patch is really good. It's only been a couple weeks since the game launched into early access, so it's incredible to see how quickly the dev has been able to address several of people's biggest gripes. On top of that, he's continued to adjust the balance of the game. I'm confident that with more time, he'll be able to fix some of these issues like farming and trading goods between owned regions. Let me know in the comments if you'll be updating to the new patch or sticking to the main branch for now. A big thanks goes out to the YouTube members and Patreon supporters who help fund this channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.